The night of my wedding should have been the safest moment of my life. Instead, it was the moment someone tried to kill me. The Whitmore estate in Miami looked like something out of a luxury magazine that night. White marble floors, crystal chandeliers reflecting the ocean lights, a string quartet playing softly on the terrace while the last of the guests finished champagne. 200 people had just watched me marry Ryan Whitmore. Everyone said I was lucky. Ryan came from an old Florida family. His construction company, Whitmore Industries, built half the luxury waterfront developments along the coast. His mother, Patricia Whitmore, moved through the reception like royalty, greeting politicians and investors. And me? I was Emma Carter, the quiet girl from a respectable but modest investment family in Atlanta.
Ryan always said he loved that about me.
Said I was grounded, simple, honest. Looking back now, I think he meant something else. Predictable. After the reception ended, Ryan kissed my cheek and whispered that he had to step outside for a quick call with one of his partners who had flown in from Dubai. Go up to the bridal suite, he told me with a smile. I'll be there in 10 minutes. The bridal suite was the largest room in the estate, prepared all afternoon by staff. Roses, champagne, candles, a balcony overlooking Biscayne Bay. I walked upstairs alone, still wearing my wedding dress. I remember thinking how quiet the house suddenly felt. The music downstairs had faded. Most guests had already left. When I opened the suite door, the room smelled strongly of roses and expensive perfume. I stepped inside, and that was when the door slammed shut behind me. The sound made me jump. Before I could even turn around, I heard the lock click. My heart skipped. Hello. For a second, I thought maybe Ryan had followed me upstairs as a joke. But the voice that answered me wasn't his. Don't scream, Mrs. Whitmore. It was Mrs. Rosa Bennett, the Whitmore estate's elderly house manager. She had worked for the family longer than anyone else. The staff treated her almost like a second matriarch of the house. When I turned, I saw her standing near the door. Her hands were shaking. Her face looked pale in a way that made my stomach tighten. Mrs. Bennett? I said, confused. Is everything all right? Instead of answering, she rushed across the room and grabbed my hands. Her grip was surprisingly strong. You need to listen to me, she whispered urgently. I blinked at her. What? Her eyes moved quickly toward the hallway door as if she expected someone to appear at any moment. Then she said something that made absolutely no sense. You have to change your clothes.
Now.
I stared at her. What? There isn't time, she said, almost pleading. Take off the wedding dress. Put on anything else. Quickly. My pulse began to rise. Mrs. Bennett, what is going on? But she ignored the question. Instead, she pointed toward the back of the suite. The garden doors, she said. They lead down to the rear path behind the boat dock. I shook my head slowly. Why would I? Her voice suddenly dropped to a frightened whisper. Because if you stay in this room, you won't survive the night. The words froze the air around us. For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. What are you talking about? I said. She squeezed my hands harder. You must trust me, Emma. It was the first time she had ever called me by my first name. Take the back stairs, she continued rapidly. Do not let anyone see you. Go to the dock and wait there until I come for you. My thoughts were spinning. This is insane, I said quietly. Ryan will be here any minute. Mrs. Bennett's face changed. Something close to desperation crossed her eyes. That, she whispered, is exactly why you must leave. For a moment, I just stood there staring at her. My mind refused to process what she had said. Not survive the night. It sounded ridiculous.
Dramatic.
Impossible. But Mrs. Rosa Bennett was not a dramatic woman. In the 3 months I had known her while planning the wedding, she had always been calm, quiet, and almost painfully composed. The type of woman who never raised her voice. Yet now she looked terrified. Please, she whispered. Her eyes were wet. Something inside my chest tightened. Just 5 minutes, she said. That's all we have. 5 minutes. My heart began beating faster. What's going to happen? I asked. I'll explain everything, she said quickly. But not here. Her hand pushed me gently toward the walk-in closet. Change. I hesitated for only a second. Then instinct took over. I stepped into the closet and quickly pulled off the heavy wedding dress. My fingers were shaking so badly that I struggled with the buttons. The silence in the room suddenly felt strange. Too quiet. Outside the balcony windows, the ocean breeze moved the curtains softly. I pulled on a simple pair of jeans and a loose white shirt I had packed for the morning after the wedding. When I stepped back out, Mrs. Bennet was already standing beside the glass garden doors. She opened them carefully. Cool night air rushed inside. "Good," she whispered. The garden behind the mansion stretched toward the private dock where Ryan kept his boats. Palm trees swayed gently under the moonlight, and small path lights glowed along the stone walkway. From the outside, everything looked peaceful.
Perfect. Go, she said.
But no questions, she insisted quietly. Just go to the dock and stay hidden. My chest tightened again. What about you? I'll come find you, she said. I promise. Something about the way she said it made me believe her. So I stepped outside, barefoot on the cool stone path. The night smelled like salt water and jasmine. Behind me, Mrs. Bennet quietly closed the glass doors again. I hurried down the garden path, my heart pounding harder with every step. The dock was about 100 yards from the mansion, hidden behind a row of thick hedges. Ryan's sleek white boat rocked gently against the wooden platform. I crouched behind a stack of coiled ropes near the edge of the dock. From there, I could see the upper floors of the mansion clearly, especially the large balcony of the bridal suite. My bridal suite. The lights inside the room were still on. Everything looked normal. Maybe this was a misunderstanding. Maybe Mrs. Bennet had panicked over something small. Maybe. The world exploded. A violent blast shattered the quiet night. The sound was so loud it felt like the air itself ripped apart. I screamed and dropped to the dock floor. A burst of orange light erupted from the bridal suite balcony. Glass shattered outward in a storm of glittering fragments. Then came the flames. They poured from the broken windows like a living thing. Within seconds, the entire suite was burning. Smoke billowed upward into the night sky. My ears rang violently. I could barely breathe. People inside the house began shouting. Lights flicked on across the estate. Security alarms started screaming. But I couldn't move. I just stared at the fire swallowing the room where I was supposed to be. The room I had left less than 2 minutes earlier. If I had stayed, if I had waited for Ryan, my stomach twisted violently. The explosion had been centered directly in the bedroom area, exactly where the bed had been prepared, exactly where the bride was expected to be. A horrible realization crawled slowly into my mind. That fire wasn't an accident. Someone had expected me to be inside that room, and they expected the flames to erase everything. Footsteps suddenly approached behind me on the dock.
Soft.
Careful. I turned quickly. Mrs. Rosa Bennet stepped out of the shadows. Her face glowed faintly orange from the distant flames. She looked up at the burning suite, then back at me. Her voice was quiet, but there was no doubt in it. "I'm sorry, Emma," she said. "They really were going to kill you tonight." For several seconds, neither of us spoke. The fire roared above the mansion like a living storm. Shouts echoed across the estate as security and staff ran toward the building. Somewhere inside, alarms continued screaming. I could see silhouettes moving behind the windows as people rushed through the halls. But down at the dock, hidden behind the hedges, everything felt strangely distant. My body was still shaking. My voice cracked. "They tried to kill me?" Mrs. Bennet nodded slowly. I was afraid of it. Her words made my stomach drop. "You were afraid of it?" I repeated. She glanced toward the mansion again before gently taking my arm. "We cannot stay here," she said quietly. "Too many people will come this way soon." "Where are we going?" "There's an old storage shed behind the equipment garage," she replied. "No one uses it anymore." I followed her through a narrow path that curved along the back of the property. The mansion behind us was now surrounded by flashing lights. Security staff were dragging hoses across the lawn while smoke poured from the shattered bridal suite windows. From the outside, it looked like a terrible accident. But now I knew better. We reached a small wooden shed tucked behind a line of overgrown palms. Mrs. Bennet pushed the door open. Inside smelled like dust and old wood. Gardening tools leaned against the walls, and several broken patio chairs were stacked in the corner. A single dim bulb hung from the ceiling. She closed the door carefully behind us. For the first time since the explosion, the world became quiet. I turned to her. You knew this was going to happen. It wasn't a question. Her shoulders sank slightly. I suspected, she said softly. My chest tightened. Suspected? I repeated. You suspected someone would burn me alive on my wedding night? Her voice stayed calm, but her eyes looked heavy with something like guilt. I heard things today, she said. Things I should not have heard. What things? She hesitated. Then she spoke two names. Ryan Whitmore. My stomach twisted. And Patricia Whitmore. For a moment, I simply stared at her. My mind refused to connect those names with the fire I had just seen.
Ryan.
My husband. The man I had married barely 2 hours ago. That's impossible, I said quietly. Mrs. Bennet didn't argue. She simply looked at me the way someone looks at a person who has not yet caught up with reality. I have worked in this house for 27 years, she said slowly. I know the way this family operates. I crossed my arms, trying to steady my breathing. You're telling me my husband planned to kill me? Her answer came carefully. I'm telling you, she said, that your husband and his mother have done terrible things before. The room felt suddenly smaller. What things? Mrs. Bennet walked to the small dusty window and checked outside before speaking again. Ryan was married once before. I know, I said. His wife died years ago. Her eyes moved back to me. Yes, she said. That is the story everyone has told. A cold feeling slid slowly through my chest. What do you mean, the story? She took a slow breath. The staff always wondered, she said quietly. Wondered what? Her voice lowered. Why she died so suddenly. The silence in the shed became heavy. Her name was Hannah Whitmore, Mrs. Bennet continued. And the night she died.
She paused.
Ryan's company was on the edge of financial collapse. I felt my pulse in my throat. And just like tonight, she added softly, everything that could destroy him disappeared the very next day. The words hung in the dusty air of the shed. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. Outside, faint sirens began approaching the estate. Fire trucks, most likely. The flames from the mansion still flickered orange against the night sky. But inside the shed, it felt like the world had stopped. You're saying Ryan's first wife didn't just get sick? I asked quietly. Mrs. Bennet looked down at the floorboards before answering. That is what everyone was told, she said. Hannah Whitmore had a sudden medical emergency. Very tragic. Very unfortunate. Her tone made the explanation sound rehearsed, like something repeated many times. But that wasn't what the staff believed, she added. My stomach twisted. What did they believe? Mrs. Bennet moved slowly to an old wooden chair and sat down, as if the memory itself carried weight. 6 years ago, she said, Whitmore Industries was collapsing. I had heard Ryan talk about that period once or twice. A bad market year. Delayed projects. Investors pulling out. He had described it like a temporary storm. Mrs. Bennet described something else. The company had borrowed heavily, she continued. Several developments had stalled. Banks were demanding repayment. Lawsuits were beginning. Her eyes lifted toward me. Ryan was desperate. I crossed my arms, trying to steady the growing pressure in my chest. And then Hannah died, I said slowly. Mrs. Bennet nodded once. The timing was remarkable. The word felt carefully chosen.
How? I asked.
Her voice dropped. 2 weeks after Hannah's death, Whitmore Industries suddenly stabilized. That happens sometimes, I said automatically. Insurance settlements, inheritance, investments. Yes, she interrupted gently. Insurance. A cold chill slid down my spine. Hannah had a very large life insurance policy, Mrs. Bennet continued. How large? $10 million. The number landed like a stone in my chest. And Ryan was the beneficiary.
My mouth went dry.
But that's not proof of anything, I said quickly. Plenty of couples have life insurance. Yes, she agreed. Plenty do. Her fingers folded quietly in her lap. But most wives do not die the same week their husband's company runs out of money. The silence that followed felt suffocating. Did anyone investigate?
I asked.
The death certificate listed complications from a sudden illness, she said. What illness? Mrs. Bennet hesitated. They never explained it clearly. A small knot formed in my stomach. And after the funeral, she continued quietly, the company received the insurance payout. How quickly? 3 weeks. My pulse pounded in my ears. That money saved Whitmore Industries. Outside the shed, another distant siren wailed. I suddenly thought about the flames devouring the bridal suite, about the bed I was supposed to be lying in right now, about the explosion that had happened exactly where I would have been sleeping. My voice came out barely above a whisper. You think Ryan tried to do the same thing tonight? Mrs. Bennet's eyes met mine. I think, she said carefully, that history may have been repeating itself. The words settled heavily between us. For the first time since the wedding began, a terrifying possibility fully formed in my mind. Ryan Whitmore didn't just marry wealthy women. He might have been burying them too. For a long moment, I simply stared at the floor of the shed. The wood beneath my bare feet felt cold. Ryan's face kept appearing in my mind. His smile during the ceremony. The way he had held my hand when we exchanged vows. The soft kiss he gave me before telling me to go upstairs to the bridal suite. Go upstairs. Wait for me. My stomach tightened. What should I do? I asked quietly. Mrs. Bennet answered without hesitation. You leave. She stood from the chair, suddenly firm again. Tonight.
Now.
I can call a car to take you to the airport. Her voice was steady. You fly somewhere safe. Somewhere far from the Whitmores. My head slowly lifted. And then what? I asked. You disappear, she said. Disappear? I repeated. Yes, she replied. You tell the police what happened. Let them investigate. I imagined the scene. News headlines. My brand new husband under suspicion for attempted murder. A long legal war. But something inside me resisted the idea. Because if Ryan had done this once before, then he had gotten away with it. My chest tightened as another thought appeared. What if Hannah Whitmore had also trusted him? What if she had never even seen it coming? No, I said quietly. Mrs. Bennet frowned. No, she repeated. I slowly shook my head. I'm not leaving. Her expression turned alarmed. Emma, you must understand. If I run now, I interrupted gently, they'll know something went wrong. She fell silent. I continued thinking out loud. The police will investigate the explosion, I said. But Ryan and Patricia will claim it was an electrical accident. That is exactly what they will say, Mrs. Bennet admitted. And if I'm gone, I continued, it will look like I panicked. My mind was moving faster now. If they planned this, I said slowly, then they planned it carefully. Years of planning. Insurance policies. Perfect accidents. Just like Hannah. Mrs. Bennet studied my face. You are not safe in that house. I know, I said. But if I leave, they walk away again. The words hung between us. Outside, the sirens had grown louder. Firefighters were probably already inside the mansion. Ryan would be there too, looking concerned, looking shocked, maybe even pretending to be heartbroken. A man whose new bride had almost died in a tragic accident. I felt something cold settle deep inside my chest. They think I'm dead, I said quietly. Mrs. Bennet nodded once. Or they will, until someone confirms otherwise. I inhaled slowly. Then another thought formed. What if they continue believing that for a little while longer? Her eyes narrowed slightly. You mean pretend? Yes. I began pacing the small shed. If I walk back into that house right now, alive and confused, what happens? Mrs. Bennet thought about it. They will be surprised, she said. Exactly. And careful, she added. That too. Ryan would suddenly have a living wife again. A A wife who had survived the accident that was supposed to kill her. A wife he would now have to watch, lie to, control, which meant he might make mistakes. And mistakes could reveal the truth. I stopped pacing. "I stay," I said firmly. Mrs. Bennet looked at me for a long moment. "You plan to live in that house," she said slowly, "with people who may have tried to murder you tonight." "Yes. That is extremely dangerous." "I know." She studied my face carefully. Then something unexpected appeared in her eyes. Respect. "You are braver than Hannah," she said quietly. The sentence made my chest tighten again. "I'm not brave," I replied. "I'm just not willing to be their next insurance payment." The distant fire trucks finally reached the front gates. Red lights flashed through the trees. I took a slow breath. "Tomorrow morning," I said calmly, "I will walk back into that house as the confused new bride who survived a terrible accident." Mrs. Bennet nodded slowly. "And what will you do after that?" I looked toward the burning mansion in the distance. "Watch them," I said, very carefully. By the time I returned to the mansion, the fire had already been contained. Fire trucks lined the circular driveway. The night air smelled like smoke and melted wiring. Security guards were everywhere, speaking in tense voices with the firefighters. I walked toward the house slowly, barefoot, my hair still messy from the garden wind. The moment one of the guards noticed me, his face turned pale. "Mrs. Whitmore?" Several heads turned. Within seconds, the front entrance erupted in confusion. "She's here." I thought she was upstairs. Someone ran inside. A moment later, Ryan appeared in the doorway. For a split second, his face looked completely frozen. Not relieved, not emotional, just stunned. Then the expression disappeared. "Emma?" He rushed toward me and wrapped his arms around me tightly. Too tightly. "Oh my God," he said breathlessly. "I thought you were in the suite." His voice sounded convincing. But now that I was watching carefully, I noticed something strange. He never once asked how I got out. "I went downstairs for some air," I said softly, pretending to shake. Then I heard the explosion. Ryan pulled back slightly, studying my face. "You weren't upstairs?" he asked.
No.
Another pause. Just a fraction of a second. But it was enough. Then he hugged me again. Thank God. Behind him, Patricia Whitmore stood at the entrance. Ryan's mother was perfectly dressed despite the chaos around her. Her eyes moved slowly across my face. Not with concern, with calculation. "I'm very glad you're safe, Emma," she said calmly. Her tone sounded polite, but something behind her smile felt cold. Very cold. The rest of the night passed in a blur of firefighters, investigators, and exhausted staff. The official explanation came quickly. Electrical malfunction in the suite wall. Faulty wiring. Unfortunate timing. Tragic coincidence. Everyone seemed eager to accept it. Everyone except me. And Rosa Bennet. By early morning, the house had quieted again. Ryan finally went to bed around 4 in the morning, claiming exhaustion from the stress. Patricia disappeared into her private wing without another word. But I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat in the small guest bedroom they had temporarily prepared for me and stared at my phone. If Ryan and Patricia had planned this, I needed proof. Real proof. Because suspicion alone would never destroy people like them. They were too careful, too experienced, which meant I needed help. Someone outside their world. Someone who could look where they couldn't see. I opened my contacts and scrolled down to one name. Lily Brooks. My cousin. Technically second cousin, but we had grown up almost like sisters. Lily lived in Seattle and worked as a cybersecurity engineer. If something existed online, Lily could find it. I hesitated only a moment before calling. The phone rang 3 times. Then her sleepy voice answered. "Emma, do you realize it's 3 in the morning here?" "Lily," I said quietly. Something in my voice must have alarmed her, because her tone changed instantly. "What happened?" I took a slow breath. "I need you to look into someone."
Who?
"Whitmore Industries," I said. There was a pause. "My husband's company." Lily was silent for a moment. "Emma," she said slowly, "you got married tonight." I know. So, why do you want me investigating your husband's company at 3 in the morning? Because he might have just tried to burn me alive. But I didn't say that.
Not yet.
Instead, I asked the question that had been growing in my mind since the shed. Lily, I said quietly, can you find financial records connected to someone named Hannah Whitmore? Another pause. What kind of records? Anything, I said. Insurance claims. Company debts. Old lawsuits. My voice lowered slightly. And especially anything that happened around the time she died. Lily exhaled slowly. Emma, what exactly is going on down there? I stared toward the dark hallway outside my door. Somewhere in this mansion, Ryan Whitmore was sleeping peacefully. The man who might have planned my death hours earlier. I think, I said carefully, my husband's first wife might not have died by accident. Silence filled the line. Then Lily spoke again. Her voice was no longer sleepy. All right, she said. I'm turning on my computer. The Whitmore mansion was unusually quiet the next afternoon. The fire had destroyed most of the bridal suite, and restoration crews had already started sealing the damaged floor. Workers moved carefully through the upstairs hallway carrying equipment and covered furniture with plastic sheets. Ryan spent the morning speaking with insurance representatives and electricians. At least that's what he told me. From what I could see, he was mostly making phone calls behind closed doors. By early evening, he left the house, claiming he needed to meet an engineer about the electrical failure. I won't be long, he said with a reassuring smile. I smiled back. Take your time. The moment his car disappeared down the driveway, the house became very still. Mrs. Bennet appeared almost immediately in the hallway, as if she had been waiting for that exact moment. He's gone, she asked quietly. Yes. For how long? An hour. Maybe 2. She nodded once. Then we should move quickly. Ryan's home office was located on the west side of the mansion, separated from the main living area by a long hallway lined with dark wooden panels. He had shown it to me once while giving a tour of the house before the wedding. Where the boring work happens, he had joked. But the door was always locked. Until now. Mrs. Bennet had quietly taken a ring of old staff keys from her pocket. Many locks in this house have not changed in years, she said calmly. The metal key slid into the office lock. A soft click followed. The door opened. Ryan's office smelled faintly of leather and cologne. Large windows overlooked the ocean. Shelves of neatly arranged files lined the walls. His desk stood in the center of the room, polished and perfectly organized. Everything looked controlled, calculated. The room of a man who planned carefully. I walked slowly toward the desk. Look for anything recent, Mrs. Bennet said quietly. Financial papers, contracts, insurance. Insurance. The word echoed uncomfortably in my mind. I opened the first drawer. Nothing unusual, just standard business folders and property reports. The second drawer held legal documents related to Whitmore Industries. Construction permits. Investment agreements. Still nothing suspicious. Then I opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a black leather folder, thicker than the others. My pulse began to quicken. I opened it. The first page immediately made my stomach drop. Life insurance policy. The name printed below it made the room feel suddenly colder. Emma Carter Whitmore. My name. My hands started trembling as I flipped through the document. Policy value. $12 million. $12 million. My chest tightened. Beneficiary. Ryan Alexander Whitmore. Sole beneficiary. The date at the top made my breath stop. The policy had been issued 6 days ago. 6 days before our wedding.
My throat went dry.
This, I whispered. Mrs. Bennet stepped closer. Her eyes scanned the document. Then she closed them briefly. It's exactly the same, she murmured. My head lifted. What do you mean? She pointed slowly to a page near the back. Ryan's first wife. My hands flipped quickly through the rest of the folder. And there it was. An older insurance document. Hannah Whitmore. Policy value. $10 million. Beneficiary. Ryan Whitmore. The paper felt heavy in my hands. 2 wives. 2 massive insurance policies. 2 sudden accidents. My heart pounded harder. They didn't just try to kill me, I said quietly. Mrs. Bennet looked at me with grim certainty. No, she replied. They planned it. I stared at the document again. 6 days before the wedding. Ryan had already been preparing my death. I carefully placed the insurance documents back into the folder. Every movement suddenly felt heavier. More dangerous. Ryan Whitmore hadn't married me out of love. He had married me as an investment. $12 million. My stomach twisted as I slid the drawer closed again. We should put everything back exactly how it was, Mrs. Bennet said quietly. If he suspects we searched this room, he will become more careful. I nodded. Within a minute, the office looked untouched again. The folder sat exactly where I had found it. The drawers were closed. The door locked. But now I carried something far more valuable than the documents. Knowledge. Ryan thought I was still the naive bride he had married yesterday. The woman who believed in accidents. In love. In him. We stepped quietly back into the hallway. The mansion remained silent. Ryan was still gone. As we walked toward the staircase, Mrs. Bennet touched my arm. There is something else, she said. Her voice was lower than before. What is it? I asked. I did not want to show you earlier, she said. Why? Because I hoped I was wrong. She reached into the pocket of her apron. Then she slowly placed something small into my hand. At first it looked like nothing more than a piece of burned metal. Dark. Warped. About the size of a coin. But when I turned it in the light from the hallway lamp, I could see thin electronic lines inside the melted plastic. A fragment of circuitry. What is this? I asked quietly. Mrs. Bennet answered immediately. I found it this morning. Where? In the remains of the bridal suite. My chest tightened. You went inside? Yes, she said calmly. Before the fire investigators arrived. She pointed to the damaged piece. That was hidden inside the wall panel, near the bed. I studied it more carefully. The melted surface had partially exposed tiny components. Resistors. A small chip. And what looked like part of a digital timer. My pulse began rising again. That doesn't look like normal wiring, I said. It isn't, she replied. The hallway suddenly felt colder. This is part of an ignition system, she continued. A timer circuit. I looked at her sharply. You're sure? My son used to repair marine electronics, she said. I watched him work for years. Her voice was calm. Certain. This device was not part of the house. The truth settled heavily between us. The explosion had not been caused by faulty wiring. It had been scheduled, programmed, planned. My fingers tightened around the burned circuit. How long would a timer like this run? I asked. Minutes, she said. Maybe an hour depending on the design. I thought back to the moment Ryan kissed me at the reception. Go upstairs. I'll be there in 10 minutes. My stomach dropped. He hadn't planned to join me in that room. He had planned to let the timer finish its job. Emma, Mrs. Bennet said softly. There is more. I looked up. The investigators will remove most of the damaged materials from the suite, she continued. But they will assume the fire started from the wall wiring. Because that's what Ryan will tell them, I said. Yes. My mind began working quickly again. 2 insurance policies. A timed ignition device. And a husband who believed his plan had nearly succeeded. I slipped the burned circuit piece into my pocket. This, I said quietly, might be the first real piece of proof. Mrs. Bennet studied my face carefully. You are planning something, she said. Yes. My voice sounded calmer than I expected. Ryan and Patricia Whitmore believed they were in control. But the truth was slowly forming. And soon they would begin making mistakes. Because people who think they've already won stop being careful. The next 2 days passed quietly. Too quietly. Ryan behaved like the perfect husband. Concerned. Gentle. Attentive. He checked on me constantly, asking if I was sleeping well after the traumatic accident. He brought me coffee in the mornings. He even suggested we take a short honeymoon trip once the fire repairs were finished. Anyone watching us would have believed we were a happy newly married couple. But I had started noticing the small cracks in his performance. The way his eyes sometimes studied me a little too carefully. The subtle questions. You're sure you weren't in the suite when the fire started? You didn't notice anything unusual before you left the room? Each time, I gave the same confused answers. I just went downstairs for air. I didn't see anything. And slowly, Ryan relaxed again, which meant it was time to start the next step. That evening, I found him in the living room reviewing documents on his tablet. He looked up when I walked in. "Hey," he said with a warm smile. "Feeling better today?" "A little," I replied softly. I sat beside him on the couch. "There's something I've been thinking about." His attention sharpened slightly. "What is it?" I let a small amount of hesitation show on my face. "It's about your company." Ryan blinked. "My company?" "Yes." I looked down at my hands, pretending to feel nervous. "You mentioned last month that Whitmore Industries has been struggling with a few delayed projects." His expression changed almost invisibly. Just a flicker of alertness. "That happens in construction sometimes," he said calmly. "I know," I replied. Then I looked up at him. "My family still has a large investment account." Ryan stayed very still. "My father built it years ago," I continued. "It's mostly sitting untouched." I watched his eyes carefully now. I was thinking. I paused deliberately. Maybe we could use part of it to help stabilize the company. For the first time since I met him, Ryan Whitmore looked genuinely surprised. "You do that?" he asked. I gave a small smile. "We're married now." The silence lasted several seconds. I could almost see the calculations happening behind his eyes. "How much are we talking about?" he asked carefully. "Enough to solve the immediate debt issues," I said. Ryan leaned back slowly. "That's extremely generous, Emma." I shrugged lightly. "It's family money. And now you're my family." He stared at me for a moment longer. Then he smiled. And something about that smile made my skin crawl. Later that night, we sat together in his office while I completed the transfer from my family account. Several $1,000,000. Ryan watched the screen with intense focus as the confirmation appeared. Transfer complete. Whitmore Industries suddenly had fresh oxygen. Ryan stood and poured 2 glasses of whiskey. "A toast," he said, "to our future." We clinked glasses. He took a long drink. Then another. Alcohol always loosens people, especially confident people. "You know," Ryan said after a few minutes, his voice slightly more relaxed, "you're a lot more useful than I expected." I tilted my head. "Useful?" He chuckled. "Don't take that the wrong way." But his words continued. "Let's just say life has taught me that wealthy wives can be unpredictable." My heart beat slowly. "What do you mean?" Ryan leaned back in his chair. "Well," he said casually, "my first marriage didn't exactly end the way I planned." My pulse sharpened. "Hannah?" I asked softly. He swirled the whiskey in his glass.
Yeah. There was no sadness in his voice.
No grief. Just mild irritation. "She had terrible timing," he continued. The room felt suddenly very quiet. "What do you mean?" I asked. Ryan smirked slightly. "Let's just say some people have a habit of being around when unfortunate accidents happen." My stomach turned cold. "And sometimes," he added with a careless shrug, "those accidents end up solving a lot of problems." He took another sip of whiskey, completely unaware that the small recording app on my phone, sitting face down on the desk beside us, was capturing every word. Patricia Whitmore's birthday party was the most extravagant event the family hosted every year. 3 weeks after the fire, the Palm Beach mansion glittered with lights, music, and expensive laughter. Politicians, investors, real estate developers, all the people who helped keep Whitmore Industries powerful. Ryan had insisted we attend. Mother would be offended if we missed it, he told me while adjusting his cufflinks. I smiled softly. Of course. He had no idea that tonight was the end of everything. The ocean breeze moved through the open terrace, while a jazz band played near the pool. Waiters moved between guests carrying trays of champagne. Patricia stood in the center of the room greeting everyone like a queen holding court. When she saw us enter, she smiled. "Emma," she said warmly, "I'm glad you're feeling well after that terrible accident." Her eyes lingered on my face. Still calculating. Still measuring. I wouldn't miss your birthday, I replied politely. The evening moved exactly as I expected. Ryan drank. Patricia entertained her guests. And slowly, the room filled with nearly 80 people. Important people, which was exactly what I needed. At 9:30, Patricia tapped a spoon against her glass. Everyone, she announced. Conversations quieted. I'd like to thank you all for celebrating another year with me. Light applause followed. Then she turned toward me. And I believe our newest family member has something she'd like to say. Ryan looked surprised. I do, I said sweetly. Patricia smiled thinly. You mentioned earlier you had a little announcement. I nodded slowly.
Perfect.
This was exactly the moment I had planned. I stepped forward, lifting my champagne glass. I do have something to share, I said. All eyes turned toward me. Ryan watched with mild curiosity. I reached into my purse and placed 3 items on the table beside Patricia's birthday cake. The room fell silent. A folder, a small burned circuit fragment, and my phone. Ryan's smile faded slightly. What's this? He asked. I opened the folder and lifted the first document. A life insurance policy, I said calmly. Murmurs spread through the crowd. $12 million. I turned the page so everyone could see the names. My name, I continued, and my husband, Ryan Whitmore, as the sole beneficiary. Ryan's face went pale. Emma, he said sharply, this is not the time. I lifted another document. And this, I continued, is the identical insurance policy from Ryan's first wife. I spoke the name clearly. Hannah Whitmore. Patricia's expression hardened instantly. The room grew very quiet. Both wives insured, I continued. Both worth millions. I then placed the burned circuit on the table. This was recovered from the wall of the bridal suite that exploded on my wedding night. Someone in the crowd whispered. Exploded? Yes, I said calmly. A timed ignition device. Ryan stepped toward me. This is ridiculous. Is it? I asked. Then I picked up my phone. And finally, I tapped the screen. Ryan's own voice filled the room through the speaker. Let's just say some people have a habit of being around when unfortunate accidents happen. The recording continued. And sometimes those accidents end up solving a lot of problems. Gasps spread across the room. Ryan lunged for the phone. But he stopped when several men stepped forward from the crowd. They were not guests. They were detectives. One of them spoke calmly. Ryan Whitmore. The room froze. You are under arrest for attempted murder, insurance fraud, and conspiracy. Another officer turned toward Patricia. And Patricia Whitmore, you are also under arrest for conspiracy and financial fraud. Ryan's face had turned completely white. This is insane, he shouted. But the handcuffs were already closing around his wrists. Patricia didn't scream. She simply stared at me with pure hatred as the officers took her arm. Guests moved back in stunned silence as the two of them were escorted toward the exit. Ryan turned once more before the door. You think you won? He spat. I looked at him calmly. For the first time since the wedding night, I felt completely steady. No, I said quietly. I didn't destroy you. The officers pushed him through the door. Flashing police lights filled the windows outside. And I finished the sentence he would hear in court many times afterward. You destroyed yourself.